Welcome back to Business Live. Let's head to the courts now, where Capital Bank is seeking to retrieve over 100 million cedis from two financial institutions. We have the details plus other international stories coming up next in our summaries.
The defunct Capital Bank has gone to court to recover over 100 million Ghana cedis, being debts owed by CDH Financial Holding and CDH Savings and Loans. The bank, which was among the two banks that were taken over by state-owned GCB Bank over severe liquidity challenges, wants the High Court to order the defendants to pay the full amount plus the accrued interest. The defunct bank also wants the court to order the Bank of Ghana to withdraw the licenses of the defendants, CDH Financial Holding and CDH Savings and Loans, for their inability to pay back investment on maturity dates. Some financial observers are warning that many Ghanaians will be pushed to trade with black market operators if the Bank of Ghana's directives on foreign exchange trading are not properly implemented. According to them, inasmuch as the directive seeks to further formalize the financial space, a proper monitoring and enforcement system needs to be put in place to ensure well-regulated foreign exchange regime. The Bank of Ghana has issued a directive to Forex Bureau operators, which among other things require that people show their ID cards before they can change the cedi to dollar. Government on Monday announced that the Ghana Commodity Exchange will start full operations on Tuesday, November 6, to link buyers and sellers of some selected commodities. The GCX is an online regulated market that links buyers and sellers of commodities to trade by rules and to ensure quality and timely delivery and settlement of products. Addressing a news conference on Monday to respond to some emerging national concerns, Kojo Aponkroma, the Minister of Information, said government currently owns 100% shares in the GCX. He said in the first 12 months, the GCX will trade staple foods including maize, soya bean, rice, dry beans, millet, sorghum, and groundnut. However, he said after 12 months of trading, the GCX will trade in cashew, cocoa, timber, shea butter, and vegetables. Additionally, the GCX after 3 years of trading will trade in metals, minerals, petroleum, and gas. The UK's aviation regulator says concerns over the cost and schedule of a new Heathrow Airport runway must be answered urgently and decisively. In the letter to the Department for Transport, the Civil Aviation Authority says it has concerns over Heathrow Airport Limited's information flow. Airlines have tried and failed to get answers to their concerns. Answers are needed to retain confidence in the third runway project, Richard Murayati said. Plans to build more airport capacity in the southeast of England have been beset by rows, delays, protests, and competing plans. But in June, the Cabinet finally approved a new runway plan for Heathrow, a move described by ministers as a historic moment for the UK. The Department for Transport asked the Civil Aviation Authority to monitor how well Heathrow Airports Limited is engaging with interested parties over the £14 billion plus expansion. Online bookings and check-in with Ryanair will close for 12 hours after the airline said it needed to shut down its website and mobile phone app. It said the shutdown from 17 hours UK time on Wednesday to 5 hours on Thursday was needed for a computer systems upgrade. Ryanair sincerely apologized to customers for any inconvenience and urged anyone needing to check in to do so before the closure. It can't, as Germany's pilots union said, it could not rule out more strikes. Ryanair has faced a series of industrial actions across Europe.
So those were our summaries for tonight. Let's start our bulletin from the aviation sector. About 27 African countries have signed the Single African Air Travel Market Treaty to open up their airspaces to each other. Despite the interest, lack of commitment by member countries is affecting its implementation. We have details coming up in this report. So in terms of population, Africa accounts for about 16% of the world's population, yet the aviation industry only contributes 3% to the global market space. Obviously, there are a lot of issues facing Africa's aviation sector. Talk of commitment from government, funding issues, and emerging technologies. So we are currently in Toulouse, France, to be specific, where players in the sector from Africa are meeting to deliberate on ways to foster growth in the aviation sector.
Dubbed the Great Enabler, Aerospace in Africa, the first ever white paper on Africa's aviation industry was to analyze the different segments of the aviation sector and challenges facing the industry. With just about 3% contribution from Africa to the global market space, industry players believe it's about time African leaders begin to see the aviation sector as a key enabler to the continent's socio-economic growth. Earlier this year, 27 African countries signed a treaty to open up their airspaces to one another. But as it stands, this agreement is only working on paper.
SATM was signed in January 2018. Even before SATM was signed, the idea of Yamoussoukro Declaration was implemented. Many African countries have liberalized their airspace. But these 27 countries that signed, if they completely free their space to one another, they represent more than 80% of the African traffic.
Right.
And AU, the infrastructure division of AU, should do a bit more.
In terms of?
In terms of really being proactive in promoting this.
Special Envoy to Africa on Aeropolitical Africa, Raphael Kuchi, also blamed the industry's low contribution to GDP to several factors, including the inability of member countries to amend the aviation laws.
The 27 countries that have signed were waiting for the regulatory text to be developed and adopted. Most of it have been done except one regulatory text, which is a dispute settlement mechanism. In other words, when two countries have a dispute as a result of their airlines operating between each other's countries, how do they resolve this? This is the only text that is not resolved yet. But up until now, we ought to have been seeing airlines from each other's country freely operating across the borders. But my understanding is that some of the civil aviation authorities need to change their regulations, the civil aviation regulations, to make it easier for airlines to operate. This is also yet to be done. And we anticipate that probably by beginning of next year, we would have the executing agency, which is AFCAC, do the sensitization workshops and enable airlines and the civil aviation authorities to put the regulatory frameworks in place so that airlines can start to fly freely.
The aviation industry, when taken seriously, could help increase access to healthcare, enhance food security, promote education, training and innovation, as well as empower businesses with innovative products and solutions. The launch of the white paper in Toulouse, France, is expected to help break down barriers to the movements of people and goods across Africa. It also aims to analyze the role of aerospace technologies in sectors with the greatest possible impact on social and economic development, including manufacturing and industrialization, civil aviation, agriculture, healthcare, and humanitarian services. Reporting from Toulouse in France, Sandra Esinamapenu, Joy Business.
Meanwhile, Vice President of Africa International Air Transport Association, Raphael Kuchi, has described aviation charges and taxes in Africa as a major impediment to the sector's growth. He said Africa has one of the highest aviation passenger charges in the world. A development, if not dealt with immediately, will continue to constrain the potential of the industry. In my opinion, I think one of the things that is really affecting the aviation industry in Africa is about taxes on tickets, aviation fuel, and all that. Do you also see it as a problem? And if we go the way we are going, are we going to see a growth in the sector and also tourism as well?
Well, aviation taxes and charges is a major impediment, particularly in Africa. It is a big problem, and if not dealt with, not handled properly, we would continue to constrain the potential of African aviation. I have always said, if you look at the taxes and charges across different markets and different regions, Africa seems to have the highest taxes on the air passengers and aviation generally. Now, the reason are not far-fetched. In many cases, government says they need to generate additional revenue. And it's much easier to just put a tax on aviation than to go and tax road transport or tax other sectors. So they just put it on there, the passenger will pay. Now, but whilst you are getting that small additional money from the passenger, you are actually restricting or limiting the number of passengers that can actually come into the country and do business. So you would have been better off actually opening up this market so that we can be able to, you can have more passengers traveling and you take advantage of the growing numbers. You will generate more traffic and you will get even more money by that way.
Mostly the taxes that are taken from the aviation sector doesn't even go back into the aviation industry. They use it for road infrastructure, things that are not in any way linked to the aviation industry.
That is true, and that is actually contrary to the ICAO policy provision. ICAO stipulates that all monies that are collected from aviation must be plowed back into the aviation sector. Unfortunately, in Africa, many of the governments collect these taxes and they channel them into other sectors other than aviation, which is unacceptable and which is not right.
What can be the way forward?
Well, the way forward would be for governments to really understand and appreciate that aviation is an economic enabler, and that if you want to generate a little money from aviation, you will be doing so at the expense of bigger bucks coming into the country. Because for every tourist that come into the country, the tourist will take a taxi, the tourist will stay in a hotel, the tourist will eat in a restaurant, he will probably shop, and he'll probably go to other places of attraction. All of these places will pay taxes. So you're going to get more money if more tourists are coming into the country. So why do you want to limit the number of people who can come into the country?
All right, so we have a lot to talk about when it comes to the aviation industry, particularly in Ghana, and issues rising up from the conference that we attended in Toulouse in France. And joining me in the studio to delve more into this very topic is Ifya Poku, our very own, who is the news editor of Adom FM, and also Inshirado as the head of thought leadership with Joy FM. Thanks so much for joining me on Business Live.
Thanks for having us.
So we went to Toulouse, thought-provoking, insightful, and very educative. Ifya, let me start with you first. What was your general perception about the aviation industry before you went to the conference?
Well, before we went to the conference, I thought that everything was well and good with Ghana, except for the fact that we don't have a national carrier, which I was sad about. But I didn't know the extent of opportunities that were available to African countries, especially Ghana, that there were 63 million aviation and tourism jobs out there where we could take advantage of, and we were just sitting. That was my heartbreaking point, and therefore that kind of pushed me to a point where I think we need more advocacy in that sector. So I don't care whether Ghana is going to start a privately owned national carrier or a private-public partnership, which we tried before, and the matter is in court with Sami Krab and some other stakeholders in the International Court of Justice. But I think that we should tap into the job opportunities that await us.
Tourism is one of them.
Tourism is one of them. And other countries like Mauritius, Ethiopia, South Africa, Seychelles are making it big. Why can't we get a part of that cake?
Right. I'll come back to you, but Inshira, We are about 16% of the population when it comes to the world population, yet we contribute just about 3% to the aviation industry. Well, but we are also being told that when it comes to charges and taxes on aviation transport, we are the highest in the world. Is that serious? Is this something we should be concerned about?
Well, we must be concerned about it. And the thing about aviation, and like any transport system, it allows for the flow of goods, services, and ideas. And so if you have a situation where you're contributing far less than any other continent to the global GDP, as far as aviation is concerned, and yet you contribute 16% in the total human population, then you find ways to aggressively grow your size of the pie.
Right.
You cannot compete when you're outpricing yourself out of the market. It's cheaper to fly across Europe from the UK to France or from the UK to Belgium than it is to fly from Accra to South Africa.
But, you know, taxes on aviation fuel is really high where we find ourselves. So one will argue that if you're paying so much on aviation fuel, why wouldn't the airlines price their tickets so high?
Well, there are other people who are doing it right, and they're finding better ways to ensure that they offset some of the cost to ensure to make the prices cheaper. Now, in your conversation with Mr. Kuchi, he said something very, very instructive, that if you want to increase demand, you've got to have to drop the price by making the supply heavy. When you have more flights in and out of the place and you're transporting more and more people, the economies of scale make it possible for you to now charge a lot lower than you would charge if you had only a few people using it. Back in the day, in fact, one of the telcos in this country would charge you when you receive a phone call. This was when there was only one.
Yes.
Now they're throwing you know, services at you that you can get free calls, you can get this. It's when there's more competition, and we have an opportunity to actually do that. With the passing of the single African air transport market, it gives us all an opportunity to now flatten our borders, to have a lot more flights go across the continent.
Yes, we will talk about that later, but that single market thing we want to do also is just on paper. We've not been able to get any commitment from the countries because of various reasons. But let me ask you about domestic transport in Ghana. Traveling from Kumasi to Accra, Accra to Tamale and all that, it's quite expensive. And we understand that if you need to build aviation, you have to start from the domestic market first. What role do we have to play as a nation, as stakeholders, to ensure that we build the domestic market first before even international?
I think that's where leadership comes to play. Political leadership, political will is very, very critical in this matter. You know, you need politics, and that was very clear among all the speakers at the white paper presentation. It was very clear that what Ethiopia has done is as a result of leadership. What Mauritius has done is as a result of leadership. What Seychelles have done is all leadership. And we can start growing from our domestic airlines, like you said, because, you know, since we started domestic air travels, we've gone very far. People who travel to Kumasi and Tamale for funerals and other weddings and other family gatherings would rather take the airline instead of driving because of the long distance. It saves time and all that. So why don't we push political leadership so that we have a national policy for domestic travels, and then we're going to have more airlines. Like Isha said, if you bring down the prices,
cost,
what you do is that you increase the number of players in the domestic airline industry. That automatically forces the prices down, because look, since Passion Air came into the business, African world is being forced to adjust its market, adjust its policy. Now, even the issue about enforcement of the disability law is now being called to question, because you need to meet international standards. So it is obvious, it's proven everywhere, that once you have a lot of players in the market, you push prices will definitely come down. So we need more. So that is where I'm saying that political leadership is key. We need to do a lot of advocacy, push the Ministry of Aviation, push government as a whole to give us some policy direction in this area. Then from domestic, we'll push it to the international level.
I'm sure they're listening. Unfortunately, we don't have enough time to go, but we'll definitely visit this topic again, because we have answers that are not, questions that are not been answered as far as air ticketing, aviation fuel is concerned. But let's move on. But we still stay on the aviation industry, where Chinese Embassy, in collaboration with Ghana Immigration Service, have launched a Chinese language training program for immigration service officers at the Kotoka International Airport in a bid to enhance communication and trade ties between the two countries. Statistics by the Ghana Immigration Service shows that an average of 400 Chinese arrive through the Kotoka International Airport every week, hence the need for such move.
In all, 70 immigration officers will be undertaking the Chinese language course. The officers will be put in 2 groups of 35 officers each. The groups will undergo 3 2-hour lessons each week over the next 8 weeks to get themselves well acquainted with the Chinese language. According to the Chinese Director of Confucius Institute at the University of Ghana, Dr. Maylan May, the move will go a long way to enhance communication between officers and Chinese migrants.
September, the President of Ghana visited China, and with that visit, I'm sure the relationship between China and Ghana is promoted, and more Chinese will come to Ghana, either visit Ghana or do business here. So it's very, very important for the immigration officers to learn some Chinese to help them to communicate with the Chinese.
Those who excel in the first training session stand the chance of obtaining a Confucius Institute scholarship to study in China. Head of training for the Ghana Immigration Service noted that the training program will also help facilitate trade.
We embrace it because as Ghana Immigration Service, we are supposed to be interacting with all travelers. And Chinese, as we are all aware, is one of the best languages spoken in the world, as we heard at the opening ceremony. So for us in Ghana Immigration Service, it can only be beneficial. We can only take advantage of it to facilitate our work. More Chinese travel to Ghana, and we should be equipped to interact. So we take it as an opportunity. That's why we went for it.
Very interesting development at the airport. Let's go to the rail sector now. And Minister of Railway Development Joe Garte is warning encroachers along the country's rail lines to vacate or face the full rigors of the law. He said that national security is currently investigating some staff of the company and individuals for various offences and will be prosecuted if found guilty.
According to the Minister for Railway Development, Joe Garte, the national security is undertaking audits of some abandoned coaches and other properties of the railway company in the country to establish the company's assets. He identified activities of encroachers as a hindrance to the rehabilitation works on some rail lines. The Railway Ministry is currently on a rehabilitation agenda to improve rail transport across the country.
National security has given us the figure. I've asked the railway people also to give me the figure. Because what is happening is that as we are trying to preserve the state's assets, some people are actively stealing. And if they hear that the railway minister said we have 5, that means that they can steal the rest. So please, don't let me mention any figure now. When we finish the audit and we hold a press conference and we know where they are, I want to use this occasion to send a friendly warning at this stage to those who are stealing railway property, that your time will catch up with you. The arm of the law is long. And when it catches up with you, there will be no mercy. We have to protect state property. We can't dissipate and sell state property. It has come to our notice that some workers of railway and so on are giving out land to people near the railway stations, and trespass and encroachment is going on with the active support of some people who must know better.
The minister has also been defending government's decision to rehabilitate abandoned coaches rather than buying new ones.
We came to the conclusion when we came into office that we will stop the process of scrapping, selling scrap items and see whether we can rehabilitate some. So far it's been very good. I think 10 coaches have been rehabilitated in Second Takwa. It's been rehabilitated to our satisfaction. Now we've come to the Tema section. Now we started rehabilitating the coaches because the Tema Accra to Tema line is very soon going to be brought back into operation.
All right, so that's all for our bulletin tonight. But for more news, do log on to myjoyonline.com/business for more business updates. My name is Sandra Esinamapeno. I just passed through the Kotoka International Airport, so perhaps I'm permitted to say "xie xie," that's goodbye in Chinese. Thanks for watching.